It's pretty good. You guys are getting good at this, getting quiet. Okay, we'll get started. Our agenda is normal. We got a little special program today on terrorism and Cyber Terrorism to be specific. It's going to be by George Sebastian coming up. There's our money. Didn't get the Grafton donations in this month. We'll have next month. Membership. And as a general reminder, if anybody has any information for us, please talk to us. We're getting tired of not hearing from you. Monthly newsletter, how many got it? This one we got, majority of people get it. If you don't get it for a couple months or 2 months, you know, come in and let's talk about it. Most likely it's a setting on your computer, or it's possible emails have changed. So we want to hear about those. This is a request that we're going to have for getting some new computers. We talked about this when we moved into the lab last year. We want to have all the computers in the lab the same and try to get rid of some of these problems, of these mysterious problems. We don't know if this will do it completely, but it sure is a good start to get them all the same. And most of those computers are 5 years old or older. A lot of them are. So we're thinking of replacing them all 16 at one time this fall, and we'd like to have a vote on this money. That would be the maximum we would allow to be spent on this. And most likely it'd be a lot less. We're hoping it will be at least. We're finding that there's less and less competition at this time on towers. Tower computers are sort of drying up. If you go to H&H Grace, or was it H? Greg, yeah. They don't have any no more, no towers. You go to up at the same shopping center that's in up in Crystal Lake. You go to Staples or no Office Max, they don't have any either. So it's getting less and less competition. They're all going to laptops. So with that room the way it's set up, we want to keep laptop, tower type computer underneath, and it works. So we're having some more difficulty than we thought we would. So we're shopping closely. Yes.
Move to approve appropriation of $12,000 for up to 16 new computers.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for second from A. So that question?
Yes. Will you tell us what the particulars of the computers you intend to buy before you buy it?
No. we're negotiating. They're going to be
at Microsoft before you buy it.
Yeah, we will. We'll look at them. That's definitely true because with all this hassles, and we got to keep on the list of trying to get good equipment. So we're going to try to get the price down reasonable and not get too high, but we still want to get some good computers that have a stable set of drivers and it will hopefully work better than we had. So let's all have a vote on that. All those in favor? Aye. Those against? No. It's one vote. Yeah. Tony. Yeah. It's not like this.
He had to do that.
Okay. Training. We have Ralph, come on up and tell about the program at Steve.
I get your dad. Well, good morning. We're getting ready for the fall training program, and you can see we have 4 listed up there, but we really got 5. You know, it's subject to change, because every once in a while we have to either move one, cancel one, but here we added an additional class. But these are all listed on our website, on the Sun City website. We also have the sheet on the bulletin board in the lab if you can't remember or want to look and see what's coming up. And the listing on both is for the entire 3 months of September, October, and November. And I think we have a total of 12 at this point, and probably we'll have a few more. But there is an additional class being added. Frank's going to teach, of course, Picasa Google Photos on the 15th of September. And I know many of you have Picasa and thinking, well, you know, what am I going to do now? It's going to go to Google Photos. He's going to explain to you how it works and, you know, the advantages it looks like on Google Photos, maybe over Picasa. So that class, like I say, will be the 15th of September. And it's not up there, but it is on the website as well as in the lab. So if you want to come to that class, I'm sure it'll be very helpful to you as you move into Google Photos. We're also going to try something new. We're going to be putting some links on our website to go into various training. For an example, if you wanted to get some information, say on, of all things, Windows 10. Yeah, we'll have a couple of links on there where you can find some information on Windows 10. I did have one that I sent to John, and I think it's got about 15 or 20 different areas. I could say, well, I want to know how to get into, or how to find my control panel. It might be 5 minutes, and it takes you all through how to find it. You don't have to sit there for an hour or hour and a half watching a video to find out 1 or 2 things you want to know. And we'll be looking at other items, and that way, if you can't make class or if you're at home and thinking, oh, I wonder how I do that, it might be on our website. And you can just click on it and get the information there. So we're going to try it and see how it works out. Last thing, we're still looking for help. Yeah, I know everybody laughs. But there is a sheet back there, and last time I saw it, there was nobody's name on it. I'm looking for somebody to sign up because we need help in the lab. So I hope you enjoy the classes, and if you have any ideas on additional classes, of course, we'd like to have you tell me an instructor, and we'll try to set up classes for you. Thanks.
We're having a flurry of computers come into the lab that are badly messed up. And it turns out that people are listening to the telephone call that you get. Has anybody gotten a phone call from somebody in a foreign country that knows that your computer is all screwed up and they want to fix it? Well, listen carefully. They cannot know what your computer does. And if they were looking at your computer, they would not know what your phone number is. So these are fake calls. What they're doing is cold calling people. And if you go through Sun City and cold call, somehow or other, a good percentage of people are sending them money to fix their computer. And if you get a phone call and they start telling you that your computer is screwed up, hang up as fast as you can. Do not listen any further to that. These are not legitimate calls. They'll tell you they're from Microsoft. They're not. The other one is you get pop-up on the screen that says, your computer is not working properly. We see that you have a number of viruses. Call this number for a Microsoft technician to fix your computer. It's fake. Do not call that number. Microsoft never puts a pop-up on your screen telling you to call it. So do not call when you see a pop-up on the screen. Do not listen to the phone call when they tell you your computer's screwed up. It's not.
Okay, community matters, we have a few things. For the first time in a long time, we get the cow meeting computer board meeting will be September 7th. Normally our meeting's before, this time it's after. And the board meeting is down on the 21st. The flag ceremony for 9/11 Memorial Display is going to take place Sunday, the 11th, outside. It's going to be a beautiful day, so we expect to see a lot of people out there. The best thing to do is look at page 25 of Lifestyle Magazine. You see all the features. They have stuff on Saturday, Sunday, and setting it up on Friday. So they could use some help. And it's going to be maybe a good weekend next week too. Forecast looks pretty good this week. The VA medical bus is going to be here the 23rd of September, and it will be here every month from now on. Or last month was the first month they did it on a monthly schedule, and it would be it was out there last month. It'll be out there this month. So if you're VA and you can check all your records and everything there, they do want to call if you're going to come. That will speed things up. So look in the Lifestyle for a number to call them and make an appointment. And with that, we'll have George tell us all the good news about terrorism, cyber terrorism. George.
Okay. You've all heard a lot about cyber terrorism. We're going to talk about it in context of some good news on that front. We'll start with the bad news, but we'll go to the good news. Many of you may have read Ted Koppel's book. Ted Koppel, being an unemployed journalist, did what every unemployed journalist does. They wrote a book. And he, in order to sell that book, made it a bit sensational in some respects. And so we're going to talk a little about the book and then lead into some other issues. The book really divides itself into three sections. It talks about the cyber attack itself, and he talks about the network, the electrical grid. He talks about a nation is unprepared, and then he talks about surviving the aftermath. His premise is that this cyber attack would put our entire grid system down, not one sector, but all of it, for up to 6 to 8 months. And ultimately he comes down to the conclusion that this would lead to, widespread neighbors shooting neighbors for food, et cetera, et cetera. And he really carries this to a real extreme in the book. But he talks about basically the electrical system. There are basically three aspects of cyber terrorism. You can talk about access to data alone. We've got a lot of that. You can get to the point where you're talking about access to and an ability to extract data. We've had instances of that. And then you get down to actually destroying the system controls and taking control of the system, such as the grid. This is a big jump down to this isn't working real well. This is a real big jump to get here, and this is where he's starting from. But the Sony, recently we've had the Sony and some financial institution incursions. We recently just had the DNC hacked. We've had the Illinois voters registration records hacked. Those are all informational issues. Those are not really necessarily the kind of a hack to go to jump 3 where you're actually taking control of those systems. The nation unprepared, he talks to the fact that he believes that the system is so intertwined that the nation is not prepared, and that most companies, particularly small utility companies will not spend money on adequate security. I believe that that is not true. Points out that long distance transmission lines require large this is really the guts of his argument. He's talking to the transmission system that we currently have now, where we have large transformers to upload into high voltage transmission lines. The other end, we have transformers download into distribution voltages. These are very large transformer systems. His point is that if those were destroyed, it would take 6 to 8 months for those to be replaced and the system would be completely down. That's not, I don't believe it would take 6 to 8 months. And what I've read is that in an emergency like that, it would be dealt with more effectively than that. But the main problem is, the main problem is here that what he doesn't recognize is, yes, that's true, we do upload for transmission efficiency. In a national emergency, we can transmit over our lines at low voltage. Not efficient. It's not a good cost benefit issue to deal with, but it can be done. And if the alternative is the system be nationwide be completely down, that would be the alternative, the first alternative that would probably be employed. And while you wouldn't have all electricity, you would certainly not have a situation where you had no electricity. Now, his third part is this whole thing about, food and supply issues that people really almost a survivalist thing. And I really think that's pretty far-fetched. Everything I've read from government sources and other sources that seem to know what they're talking about in this area don't believe that that would happen. But the conclusions he reaches are, in the book, he's right, there's an exposure. And I think he underestimates the effectiveness of the industry cybersecurity and the government, and we'll talk about that. And he underestimates the industry response, which, as I said, could be a drop to low voltage transmission. He misunderstands the effectiveness of government cyber programs completely, because he really doesn't go into those at all. Now, this is the electrical grid. You'll notice it's segmented into various areas. And if we look at that, well, the same issue, but broken. What he's talking about is that all of the interconnectability points could be compromised at one time. And he points out that those are the vulnerable points. Well, they're vulnerable, but they're not vulnerable, because the idea of splitting this out is that you don't have the whole system connected all at once and be subject to an attack. Secondly, I think he clearly underestimates the effectiveness of the firewalls at those junction points. The terrorists may realize that that's a good vulnerable point to go after, but so does industry, so does the government, and those are points that are being protected with some pretty sophisticated systems. Now, this is what I was talking about before, the system where we bring power up and then down to the system. That's basically what we're doing right now. But in the future, it's going to be a lot more complex and diversified. The future plans for the electrical system are still using grids, but they go both ways. And there'll be a lot of distributive processing and distributive generation capability by areas, which makes us much less vulnerable to any one segment being compromised. Now, there's some definitions here that are important. The State Department defines terrorism, or cyber terrorism, as a premeditated political attack against by a national government. Cyber terrorism, the FBI defines it as essentially the same thing using computer systems. But the national, and we also have a National Infrastructure Protection Plan. This plan has been updated several times. The most recent plan was updated in 2013. I think it's actually been updated, or it's in the process of being updated right now. And this is involving government, industry. It involves a whole cross-section of professional talent to develop a plan to protect our infrastructure electronically. Now, the national a criminal act perpetrated by the use of computers, and we can read through that, with the goal of influencing a government or population to conform to a particular political, social, or ideology. That's the definition that the infrastructure people use of terrorism. Now, the tools for terrorism, and response, tools to prepare for dealing with it, the event, and the response afterwards. But I think the important thing is this chart, which talks to who is going to be involved in terrorism. The block up on the top is basically this. We go up this way. It's capabilities. So these are these are capabilities. Down here we have desire and then intent. So obviously the real crucial box is right in here. Now that's pretty limited. Also, you have to add the United States, and basically, the United States is the leader in cyber terrorism. Okay, they may not necessarily recognize it, but all of it, we'll talk about some of the techniques. They've all been developed by the United States, basically, and so really, these are the things that you're really concerned with is up here, and in reality. The probability of those things really coming off is really pretty slight. But the United States is one of the key players. Physical attacks against America, we've had some. Data has been intercepted, analyzed, research into new intelligence technology. Major systems that we've had, physical attacks that we've had. These are the ones that have been the major attacks, and it's interesting to note that if I probably asked a consensus of the room, the only one up there that you've probably ever heard of is the 2003 Northeast blackout. Most of these other attacks were contained in a way that people didn't even know they happened, okay? And they were dealt with effectively. Cyber terrorist virus programs, these were basically developed by the United States, and these are the key programs that are used in cyber terrorism. Obviously, each one of those is modified by each intelligence agency, but they are there. Genoa 2 is a Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, and they've been building on developing and ways of intercepting and anticipating and preempting terrorist strikes for some time. Dark Web is a project by a professor at Arizona, started out, and basically what they're doing is they're analyzing information and they're working in terms of collecting data and doing a lot of systematic collection and analyzing it and looking at relationships. Northeastern University, they've studied social networking, and they piggyback off that data collection, and they're developing social networks that monitor social network transmissions between known terrorist operations, and they key on not just the organizations, but keywords, a whole number of things that they develop these networks. The vast majority of surveillance is done through CALEA group, communication to system point. All of your phone, the law requires all phone calls and internet transmission, et cetera, to be available for you, U.S. Intelligence and law enforcement personnel. That does not mean the content, that means the transmission. My message to Bill Zaletti or something, there's a record of that. And if they get a warrant, they can go ahead and find out who I've been talking to or who I have been communicating by internet. So that has been available, and that is required by law of these companies. Social network analysis is becoming a really big thing in terms of terrorists, dealing with terrorist situations. And one thing you want to keep in mind as we've been talking through this, you might have noticed a thread. The argument here has not been how we deal with a terrorist attack. It's how we avoid it in the first place. It's all been working toward collecting data so we can anticipate and deal with the problem before it arises. The intelligence community believes that the threat comes from a bunch of different groups. The one thing that is a problem, it hasn't been, the whole thing of the lone wolf issue is coming up down to terrorism. Before that, it was thought of as groups, countries, and things. But there is some capability of individuals to do things, but not at a large scale. Cyber is an interesting thing. This is a question of taking a lot of computer people, students, and training them into really training for government employment. Okay, and these start out at University of Texas, but they've also expanded that. Tulsa is, it was interesting, this was a meeting, this meeting was planned long before 9/11 occurred, but it was planned for the day after 9/11. And it's kind of ironic in that respect. But this group has gotten together again to discuss their ways of dealing with it. And we've also gone into recruiting hackers. The U.S. Cybersecurity Challenge is a contest, and it's open, I guess it's open to anybody, but it's typically young high school people, and what have you, and they go into a competition in which they try to hack into as many computers as they can and defend their computers against hacks from as many people as they can. And the winner of that, or not the winners, the winners really, it's more than one, they get some very good scholarships and training and what have you, and they end up working for the government. So the government is really looking at recruiting people in this area. Now there's a legal side of this whole process as well. It is a crime under the Patriot Act to basically participate in cyber terrorism. How much that has been employed? It has been employed, but I don't know how much it's really been involved in bringing criminal cases, because in most cases that we know of hacking, we don't find out who did it. And they may be overseas, which makes it more difficult to deal with. But there is an interesting case on that. I guess it's being tried under, I didn't know that we had a Illinois Terrorism Act, but apparently we do. Some kid, I think in East St. Louis or somewhere, is being tried. He intercepted a bunch of celebrities' email accounts, and I don't know why celebrities do this. And my first bit of advice on you would be, it's not a good idea to post nude pictures of yourself on the internet. So he intercepted 100 of these celebrities, and he posted them on the internet, and he dispersed them, and he's being charged under a terrorism statute in Illinois. But anyway, this is basically the Patriot Act and how it defines it. To meet the definition of terrorism, the computer crime requires it be knowledgeable, committed, with the intent of doing damage. Those are key factors on it. And that's basically how you define doing damage is probably up to, I'm sure these celebrities whose nude pictures got out thought they were damaged. I'm not sure the general populace would look at it quite that same way. They might be looking for those pictures. But anyway, also computer forensics is very helping. It's really used on the war. Data gleaned from computers seized. This is basically physical forensics. They made a raid somewhere, they picked up a computer, they pulled information out of it. A lot of data gathered on the Osama bin Laden raid has been supposedly very helpful in understanding these networks and what have you. Cyber attacks against institutional infrastructure. Why use them? Well, you know, from a country's point of view, they're cheaper. They don't involve a lot of bloodshed. You know, they're very difficult to trace. You know, there are no physical barriers. You don't have to physically send troops across borders. And it can be done remotely from anywhere, and it can affect a large number of people. So clearly this is something that is going to be looked at in the future as a means of international warfare of a sort. And keep in mind that the United States is on the offensive on this as well as on the defensive. Now, agencies that are in this fight, you have the National Cybersecurity Division mission, and basically that's a federal government organization, and it basically looks over risk management programs much more than anything else. National Cyberspace Response System, this is basically dealing with response to a problem and how to deal with it. And this is coordinated between the government and industry at all levels. CERT operations is basically definitely created for coordinating incident response with industry. There are 13, the response coordination group is made up of 13 agencies. Again, this is the response. What I really want to point out in these programs is not remembering all these things and acronyms, but just recognizing that there are a lot of folks out there doing a lot of things, and they're doing good things. Cyber Cop Portal. This is a program with local law enforcement, and it's used by local police departments to access data under federal auspices. This is done with a warrant, and it is very effective. And then we talk about the role of the FBI in the new world. After 9/11, the FBI underwent a major makeover. Mueller explained that, you know, after his comments were how the agency went from being a track them down and cuff them reputation to one of that plays a key role in counterterrorism, not only domestically, but also around the world. And that's a big change. You know, it became a big watershed thing, and as he said, you know, the public and the U.S. administration were asking, why did the FBI let this happen? And then adding, don't let it happen again. And they've taken that very seriously. Under pressure to change, they've developed a lot of training, a lot of counterterrorism capability, and it becomes, if you don't read as much about the FBI today in terms of law enforcement as we traditionally think of it in many respects. But you do read about in the paper a lot about this terrorism issue, all these terrorist attacks overseas. You'll notice FBI personnel are assigned to those cases very quickly. The main thing too was that now the FBI is sharing information with the rest of the intelligence community, and the rest of the intelligence community is sharing information with the FBI. That was not necessarily the case in the past. It looks like the Bureau priorities are working. Mueller has pointed out to these 4 or 5, these number of cases that since 9/11 could have been potentially serious terrorist attacks that were circumvented by the FBI. And in closing, we've gone through all the things that people are doing. We do recognize there is a potential for an attack. The grid is probably not as susceptible as Mr. Koppel would make it, but it is susceptible. I was gonna have Frank turn the lights off during this presentation, see what happened, but we didn't do that. But you know, throughout all of this, you gotta remember, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not watching you. And with that, I guess, entertain any questions. John? Wait for a mic.
I lived through that 2003 blackout in the Detroit area. The thing that people here in this room need to be aware of is that when you lose power, not only do you not have your refrigerator running, which is what people mostly think of, but gas station pumps don't work. You can't buy gasoline. If it was in, it started Friday night, August 13th. And spread throughout the area and was on for about a week, no power. We were fortunate enough that we had a contractor with a huge power generator, so about 5 of us tapped into that. So at least we could keep our refrigerators running. But you have no TV, no computer, no refrigerator, no gasoline. Your garage door doesn't go up. All these things that require electricity. And your furnace doesn't run, so if it would happen in the wintertime, you need to be prepared to drain the water out of your house so it doesn't freeze. So you need to think ahead of some of these things that could be happening if some damage like that happens, especially in the wintertime.
Yeah, there's no question that if the power went down, that's a traumatic issue. The question is how long it's down, and the issue that it would be down 6 to 8 months is really stretching the issue because there are alternative ways of dealing with that problem. Herman? Wait for one.
Did any of your sources consider the possibility of the MAD, mutual assured destruction? In other words, the Russians won't do it because we'll do it right back to them, which leads to a sub-question. Since our capabilities, computer-wise and so on, depend on electricity also, would we have the ability to retaliate?
Well, I think, yeah, the issue about us doing it to them and them doing it to us, sure, that counterbalances what keeps everything in line. And to answer your question, if we lost electricity, would we be able to retaliate? Trust me, all those agencies that we're talking about that would be dealing with this are not dependent on the grid. They're dependent on backup power, and they can deal with that pretty effectively. I find it interesting that a big change in corporate backup systems today. Years ago, every corporate data center had tremendous backup electricity capability, generators, what have you, and those were tested, and we went through a whole lot of things because we were really worried about the physical attack on the facilities. And now the concern more is by internet attack and that type of thing. And I'm not sure how much most of those corporate systems today are backed up as far as power capability. I'm not sure because I've been out of that for a long time. But at one time, every major corporation had data. First of all, they had data centers, number one. Those data centers, I know the data center that my company worked with, the walls were 3 feet thick of concrete, okay? And it was the size of a football field. And there were generators underground. And those generators were all, the fuel tanks were underground. There was a lot of security in terms of the danger there was, they always thought was a physical attack, and would they be able to recover? Most systems today are all backed up. Now they're backing up through the cloud and what have you. In those days, they backed up with tape, and they had tape systems and tape storage systems off-site. So, I mean, a lot's evolved over the years, but I do believe that the answer to the question would be that backup power supplies are available for crucial systems in the government.
One thought is that we these days depend so much on our financial systems and our ability to make purchases online as well, so that more and more we're dependent in our financial dealings with computers.
Well, I think you have to look at financial dealings in two ways. If you asked in terms of the financial system, those systems are backed up and backed up by alternate power sources. I would have to concede that if we had a major catastrophe, you will have to defer your Amazon purchases for some time, and that won't be the highest priority that we're dealing with, okay? And you know, that's a truism, all right? But again, we're talking about at what level. I mean, that's a convenience level issue in terms of buying something from Amazon. I think we're talking more here in terms of beyond convenience, but down to necessity. And I do believe the financial systems, every one of those companies have elaborate backup systems, and they are backed up with power backup as well. In fact, I can remember a presentation by, at the time, it was First National Bank of Chicago, and they were very proud of the fact, this is years ago, that they had backup systems out in Rockford. They were 90 feet under some rock or mountain or whatever it was in Rockford. And their backup systems, they backed up all financial transactions within, I think it was 2 minutes or something like that. And they were pointing out that that facility could take a direct hit from a nuclear weapon of the magnitude that was known at the time, in which someone raised their hand and said, well, if we get a nuclear attack, I'm not sure my bank statement's my first worry. Okay? So sometimes we have to keep all this in perspective. Barry? Oh, Barry and then John.
I think you're right about mutually assured destruction, that would keep countries from going after one another, with the possible exception of North Korea. But I think our greatest fear should be with non-government groups. Well, who do you go after? Who do you retaliate against? How are you going to dissuade them by saying we're going to retaliate against you? You can't find them. They don't exist. They're not a sovereign state. And I think that's our greatest problem.
Well, that's true, but most of the time, those people, while they have the capability to hack in and get data, they do not have the capability to hack into systems and take control of the systems. And that's a big difference. Now, John, you had...
I wonder if I could ask a question. How many people in the room have read Lights Out?
What's that?
How many read Ted Koppel's book?
Oh, how many people have read Ted Koppel's book? The book title is Lights Out. One,
I really think it will
two,
light.
3, 4, just a few. You might want to read it. It's an interesting read. I just say take it with a grain of salt, and you might want to look at our slides and when you read it and look at. He gives the impression that the government really isn't doing that much, and that isn't true at all. There's an awful lot being done behind the scenes by the government. As a matter of fact, some of the civil liberties union people are very concerned with some of the things that the government is doing behind the scenes, but they are doing it to protect you.
If I could say, if you read Ted Koppel's book, he introduced some more experts than I could read. I could get there for page after page after page, and every single expert he talked to me agreed not only that it could happen, but that it absolutely will happen. And that, as the speaker ahead of me said, somebody in North Korea, and they run the thing through 12 different countries, we can't even find out who they are, or if it's a lone person. And he stresses that the vulnerability is not the main companies, but the people with a couple of with things on their farm that are selling the power, and they don't have the money or they think they have the security. The only people he found who are prepared to deal with this when it happens are the Mormons. And he went out, he had to go out to Utah, because you couldn't just talk to them on the phone. And they have like 6 months of preparation. You need water, you need food, you need protection. It's an incredible book. It's really powerful. Every single expert said it will happen. The government can't step in. The Mormons help people, and exactly to more Katrina than
of the problems in that point though, if you read that book, most of the quote-unquote experts he talks to are very high-level political people or people in security at a very high level. But he isn't talking to a lot of the technical people, that when you go into this in more detail, the technical people who are really the ones that understand this paint a little different picture. But, okay.
I have
Last
a
question over here.
Yes, sir.
Last
Yes.
question.
I find this extremely interesting, informative, and thank you very, very much. It's frightening what someone can do in Russia or China or who knows where, or they could be in a prison right here in the United States just making trouble for us. But then I have another question. We come from an era when we had government consumer protection, okay? And every day I get some kind of a phishing expedition thing, an email. For instance, PayPal. You have a PayPal account and you're selling things on the internet and being reimbursed through PayPal. You get these phony PayPal. You got a PayPal problem. You got to contact us. What it is, somebody's trying to get a hold of your information to steal all the money out of PayPal. So my question to you is, with all of that, and all of these phishing things you get on your computer, they don't affect the United States. They affect you personally. Is there any government protection agency to whom you can forward those funny-looking emails? I forward all my PayPal ones to PayPal, and they take care of it. I'm getting less PayPal phishing things than I used to get. So I'm asking you, is on our level of just people you're worried about people, you do your banking on your computer, and you're wondering if somebody else is taking your money out through their computer, and the bank thinks it's you. And I mean, what's being done to protect us by our government in those little areas, those small little, not terrorism, but terrifying?
Well, that's a totally different topic in terms of scams and what have you. But the answer is that's no. There is not a big government agency working on dealing with preventative on that. However, if you have a problem, you can report it to your local police department. You can report it to the FBI. There's a website, I don't know the address, but you can forward those things to the FBI. Will the FBI react to your individual case? No, but when they find they've got 500 of these, then they start to react. But no, that's scams. The advice that John gave you before, Bill Gates does not make house calls. I've said that before. If you get a message that Bill Gates wants to come and visit your computer, that's not true, okay? Bill's got other things to do. And the same with if the IRS says, send me some money or I'm going to close this down or that down or I'm going to prosecute you. The IRS does not call you. They send letters. And, you can go through a whole series, a whole litany of these scams that are out there. And a lot of those are really geared at you have to protect yourself and use common sense and common judgment. I know we've done a presentation on that before, and I can remember one from Chase Bank. It was beautiful. It looked perfect. It lists every piece of information down here, grade school averages, I think. And some people in some city did respond to that. Okay. The simplest thing, if you have any question on something that's coming from you from a credit card company, your bank, or whatever, call your bank or go to your bank's website. They have a message center, and send them a message from their secured site. It'll go to their security people, and you can deal with it. But don't respond to it. The other way, by the way, the other thing, whenever you get an email that you at all suspicious, if you just go and click on that little thing that drops down that shows you where it came from, if it says, chasebank.com at Joe Blow Gmail, that's not a good sign. Okay? And so there are things that you can do individually to deal with that issue. Yes.
One more question. George, I respect your opinion and your optimism regarding the forces that are in play right now, trying to prevent any serious consequences. How do you interpret the relationship of those government agencies or government efforts with the non-cooperative political forces that we have in this country? How does the political forces stay out of that area, or what's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that in law enforcement, in these areas, a number of other areas in the government, we have a very highly competent, well-trained, dedicated workforce of career employees. Political employees come and go, okay? A lot of this is well below the political level, and I think that these people are doing a fine job. If you're asking me, could the president shut down one of those groups? I don't know if he could or not, because Congress would probably step in. But I suppose there could be political influence employed, but I don't believe there is. And I think everything I've seen, that these are really competent people doing the best job they can. Do we still have a vulnerability? Yes. We had a vulnerability to get hit by a truck walking out of this meeting, okay? But you have to put it all in the perspective of reality and probability.
Okay, thank you, George, for your question.
Thank you.
Don't forget the 9/11. Next week, we're going to have Sunday. I'll have a good program. It's going to be a little better than all the other ones, from what I read, and it should be quite good. You're asking you to come out and bring lawn chairs, so it tells you it's going to be a little longer than the 20-minute one or 10. Yeah. Yeah, but when you leave, would you take a minute to wipe off the table? It makes it easier for us to clean them up and wipe the little water that dripped in. We'd also like to remind you that the lab will be closed Monday for the holiday. And we'll see you next month. And let's go home and go outside. It's beautiful. Thank you.
How you doing? Did you get my volunteer message for October? Okay, for October. Okay, right. Okay. Yeah.